Hello, everyone. This is Guild of Inquiry, where we inquire into philosophical and scientific topics that we find interesting, giving our personal thoughts and hopefully getting into a little closer to any truths through inquiry. We don't pretend to know the answers. We only think about the topic and bounce ideas of one another. I hope you will enjoy the discussion and join in if you'd like. I am Baphometal. I'll be your host for this evening. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave comments about what you liked or didn't like about the show. Now let's get started. Hello.
Howdy.
What is going on, everybody?
What's up? Look at Wes on the screen with all the fancy lights.
Oh! I forgot about that. Wes is here.
This is fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name, well, that's not my real name. I don't know if you noticed. I go by Baphometal and the interwebs. And I was asked to help out with the discussion today. So let's have our guests introduce themselves. So how about you, Leophilius?
Hi, I am Leophilius. At least that's what people on the internet call me. I primarily focus on physics and philosophy of physics, science education, science communication, theology, which is like theology, but theology and in the other direction, an active defense of atheism, but it's not apologetics because we don't have to apologize in that way. We're special. We don't have to do that anyway. So I usually focus on that, but the last couple of years I've been reading a lot about Marxism, and I think his theory is correct. I think it's an accurate description of the structure of and progress of human society and how those two things play with each other, and how that led us to where we are and how we can use that to figure out where it is that we're going.
Nice. What about you, Joshua?
Hi, I'm Joshua. I'm a host of what is called the Atheist Uprising. It's a new channel that's on YouTube at the moment. And mostly what we try to do is really give people the proper foundation into their atheism in a sense, or at least into their naturalism, so that when you do come up against theists or apologists or whatever the situation is, you can have a better and a stronger foundation in order to withstand certain questioning by apologists and stuff. But at the same time, when I was younger, I used to be a Marxist myself. After when I left religion when I was 20, I delved right into Marxism, predominantly into Leninism at first, because I find that Leninism is the very foundation of what Marx missed, in a sense. He didn't really finish his works, and I find that Lenin finished them, in a sense, and really gave them a well-rounded foundation that can work. Though now when I look at it, I find that even Leninism is doomed to fail, because if you're a Marxist on your own, surrounded by capitalists, there's no way for your ideology to permeate. And henceforth, you're doomed to fail, and you're doomed to actually wither, just like we saw with the USSR, for instance. But there's a way to save that, and that's through Deng Xiaopingism. And I think Deng Xiaoping really built up on socialism in a way that you can use the capitalistic system while also using the socialist system as well. And together, you can create what you see with China, not now, but at the time, where they're able to catch up with the United States economically and slowly but surely militaristically as well. There are problems, but it's still much better than the original works that were done by Marx, Lenin, and Stalin.
Cool. Well, that was a great introduction about yourself. Thank you. So let's start with the definitions, I guess, for those watching and like myself. I don't know shit about this. So what is a good definition of Marxism? Who wants to start?
Well, Leo, you're muted, and I'll let Leo go first because
he's muted. I see what you're doing there.
I do think it's there's an extent to which it's going to depend on who you ask. somebody that I know well, who is also a very well-read Marxist, Jack Angstreich, might answer the question differently than I would, and both of us may answer the question differently than somebody like, say, Richard Wolff would, who might answer it different than somebody like, say, the popular Marxist leftist streamer Vosh would answer that question. But what I would say is that I think I always say that there are three primary aspects to Marxist thought that I think are core to any ideal that's going to call themselves Marxist, whether just Marxist or using Marxist as a qualifier, like in the instance of Marxism, Leninism. And that is dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and the labor theory of value. I think that some forms of Marxists might say you can get away with maintaining a Marxist ideology without necessarily needing the labor theory of value, that the dialectical and historical materialism as a method of social analysis can be enough to really establish the ideal that Marxism was, or that Marx was really trying to get at. Now, obviously, many Marxists are going to disagree with that for a variety of reasons, but I would say that a Marxist is somebody who is going to accept the three ideals that I just listed as accurate, accurate and meaningful analytic methods that can be utilized for understanding human society and how it's structured and how it progresses.
I would completely and absolutely agree with what Leophilius has stated. I think that he's right on those three definitions, definitely within the Marxist ideology. But I think he misses one thing that is definitely, when we talk about Marxism, is a big aspect and a huge topic of it, and that is revolution. And the whole entire point of Marxism was to revolt against the proletariat, my apologies, against the individuals who had money, who had wealth and everything,
the bourgeoisie,
redistribute it to the populations, to the masses in and of themselves, right? Now, the idea that Marx came up with was a kind of nucleus that was beneficial for the expansion of Marxism, and definitely when we look at the philosophical topics of Marxism when it comes to dialectic, Leophilius stated dialectic historicism, and also the other two, which now my brain is just...
Well, dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and labor theory of value.
There you go.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there needs to be revolution, because he understood that the individuals who are in power are not going to give up power willingly. And hence, a revolution needed to happen in order to make those changes so valuable to society. And that is the one thing that Lenin, I think, espoused on, because Marx thought that if everybody heard what he and Engels came up with, that the workers would come together as one and to try to oust those who from the very top. But the reality is that did not happen. The laborers were also conservative, they were liberal, they were socialist, and it just never mixed together. Lenin was the one that slowly created a new idea, which was the vanguard, in a sense. So if you create I think it was called the dictatorship of the vanguard, or the vanguard dictatorship.
Dictatorship of the proletariat.
There you go. And with that, what that was supposed to do is that you can do a revolution with a small number of individuals, and through those small number of individuals, they are able to overthrow the government and then start slowly but surely educating the masses based on their ideas and everything. So I think just with those four, we can kind of have a full rounding and understanding of Marxism. Now, there are certain individuals, such as the Trotskyists, for instance, that believe that you can have a Marxist ideology without revolution, in a sense. That you can have it with a sense of pacifism. That was before he died, in a sense. He had a new idea when he was inside Mexico, when he was exiled. And he stated, well, maybe you can be pacifist and you don't need to have revolution. But the problem with that is that if you are pacifist and the individuals around you are not, there's a greater likelihood of individuals taking you out. And that's exactly what happened with Trotsky, sadly.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah, I think
before we
Joshua
go
really
any
touches.
further,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Wes.
Oh, what's up, Wes?
I just want to. Okay, I get the division of labor or the alienation of labor. I think was part of the Marxist stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 of them. I think I get those, and I think I totally agree with those. What I remember, but you mentioned dialectical. What do you mean by that? And then I had another question in there too, I think, but I want to make sure we get that down just because I'm still a little confused about it. And before we go into the revolution stuff too much, I want to make sure I know what the hell we're talking about.
Dialectical
Right on.
materialism.
Yeah. So, and I touched on this a little bit in the one stream that we did on Skeptic Haven. Sorry if I keep clearing my throat. I've got some bubbles and they're not cooperating, and so I have to keep clearing my throat. I've got some phlegms. I just want to apologize. I'm a human being. I only have so much control over this damn thing I call my
He
body.
has the phlegms.
But so Marx called it dialectical materialism. I am gonna gloss over some things and simplify it a little bit because dialectical materialism can be quite difficult, only in the sense that it involves Hegelianism and continental philosophy, which doesn't explain anything in any way that any human was ever meant to understand it. It just does not. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
Yeah,
if you like continental philosophy, I commend you for having any ability to understand what they're writing down. I certainly don't. I can barely understand Hegel. So really what Marx was getting at was this notion of what we quite frankly, what we would today know as metaphysical naturalism. That all there really is just like the natural physical reality, the material world, and it is a dynamic and continuously evolving system, I guess you could say, and that human society is thoroughly rooted in that. You know, there are no gods or angels or demons or devils or ghosts or ghouls or spirits or anything like that affecting any of this. It's the material world and the processes and systems and functions and everything that it undergoes with respect to its continued development. And that human society is no different than that. And so that's that jump from the dialectical materialism that outlines a materialist framework for looking at reality and then extends that into a materialist analysis of the development of specifically human society. And then that's where you get the historical materialism aspect. And then it is out of those kinds of analyses that you get the concept that Josh was talking about, the concept of revolutions.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you. I'm getting a lot
Very
more.
well said. Very well
Amazing.
said. Absolutely. Yes.
And also, Hegel doesn't make sense to me at all, even.
Well,
Every once in a while,
Hegel-
okay, I get this, and then I'm like totally lost on the next page.
It's true, but
So-
when we look at oh my god, I can't even say it.
Dialectical materialism.
That word is kind of...
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Right? Exactly. One of the isms that are out there.
Yeah. The colloquialism of the.
I'm sorry. Titan Uranus in the side chat. It just really cracked me up, his comment. Seize the means of locution. Oh Lord. Locution is a word of vocabulary and stuff
The
like
mean
that.
of locution. Oh my god. I get it. That was like a very nerdy joke also. Wow. Okay.
I love it.
Fantastic. Okay, so the next one would be, what would you say are the main differences between Marxism, communism, and socialism?
I don't know. Do you want to take this one first, Josh?
Sure, I don't mind. The aspect, because it's all based on because most of them are technically the same. The thing is that socialism is the umbrella, right?
Oh.
So socialism is the umbrella term for Marxism. That's underneath socialism. You have communism, which is also underneath there. And then you can have utopic socialism. You can have scientific socialism, which is Marxism. And then you can espouse more and more into it, Trotskyism, Maoism, Deng Xiaopingism, and you can just continue to build up from there. Now, mostly with communism is that everybody is kind of held to the same standard, right? So even if you have a job, everybody is paid the same. So there's not really any differentiation between anybody. If you're somebody who's a janitor, you'll be making the same exact thing as somebody who's a lawyer, and so on and so forth. The whole entire point is that you're doing it not for the sense of money, you're doing it for a sense of duty.
For everybody, for the common people.
Yeah, exactly. Duty for the common human being, for the common man. But with Marxism, it is a bit different. It's kind of the same, but it's just a tad bit different when it comes to how, after revolution, how do you slowly build up to communism, in a sense. So in that idea is kind of like, okay, once the revolution is done, how do you get to the point where everybody is the same? And that is different with all different types of Marxist thought which is out there. There are certain individuals that built up on Marxist theory, for instance. I would say Lenin, which first started war communism. And with war communism, everybody was paid the same. Everybody was, and most of the agriculture and everything like that was put towards the military and also put towards the people who were impoverished. Now, the huge problem with that was that the deficit rose, because once you're taking everything away from people, or the people who know how to farm, now you run into a problem. Because now if they're not farming anymore and they know how to do it, it doesn't matter what worker is there, because they don't know the intricacies of farming. They might work on as laborers, but they don't know how to farm, what the seasonal ranges are within a year and everything like that. So we slowly started to see the failing of crops. You slowly started to see all these things unraveling war communism. So once he came out, or once the Soviets won, what they ended up doing is creating what is called the NEP, New Economic Policy. And with the new economic policy, what that was that individuals who were agriculturalists, for instance, they were able to sell, or people can work for a certain amount of price underneath the NEP. However, they had to buy from the state their mechanized materials. And that caused what is called a scissor effect, which the price of your modernized vehicles are not catching up with how much money the agriculturalists were actually making, and hence caused a deficit again. So in the end, Stalin figured out the solution, in a sense. That was force everybody to work in communes. And hence, that was the idea of Stalinism, and creating a state around which socialism can flourish. Sadly, that didn't necessarily work, because you need a bit of capitalism when you're surrounded by capitalists. But nonetheless, those are the little intricacies of communism and Marxism, because Marxism is just the way to get to communism, in a sense. It's the trajectory.
But on the other side, we have capitalism, where there needs to be a class that is exploited at all times, right, in order for it to thrive, right?
Almost. I mean, that is true. That is true, but I just want to point out that it's true, but it's very simplistic. And I don't want to say that this was by any means your intention. Because, as a host, you're asking questions that the average person out on the street's going to ask, and that is
also don't know anything.
one. Well, but that is definitely one that you get, is the whole concept is there has to be a class that's exploited. Okay. The only reason that I want to caution. Well, it is, but it's simplistic, but it is technically true. But the big point that I want to get at is that we need to be cautious how we frame it, because there's a lot of people out there that will frame Marxism that way, specifically to make it sound super simplistic and vague and sort of caricature the theory rather than meaningfully represent it. Gotcha. But it is true that at the end of the day, profits are extracted through the exploitation of the laboring class as a result of the difference between what they are paid in wages to reproduce their labor and the value that their labor power puts into the products that the capitalist sells on market as commodities, through which he realizes the value that the laborers put into it, and he gets much more than the laborers do out of that deal.
Very well put. But I would have to push back though, just a bit, because capitalism is kind of like socialism in a sense. It's an umbrella terminology, right?
Okay.
So there are multiple forms of capitalism which are out there, even within even with Canada. Canada is a very capitalistic but / socialistic country.
Yes.
So hence, sometimes there are benefits, or what is then called a quote unquote welfare state, for individuals who are sick or they don't make a lot of money or whatever the situation may be. The government is going to help them in order to at least have a better living circumstance, a better living situation, and rise the well-being of maybe not everybody within the nation, but certain individuals within the nation that are the working class within the nation, I should say. But for me, I look at certain models of capitalism that I find work, that is like Singapore. Now, I know a lot of people sometimes don't like when I state that because they look at it a little differently than I do, but I do see Singapore as being the model for capitalist nations to go by.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And I think that in order for capitalism to truly work, we must focus on the realm of fairness. And for fairness, it equates to, you can make money. That is not the problem. The problem isn't making money. It's the actual thing that is how we think with the money, right? And henceforth, the question is, how do we turn individuals that are multi-billionaires or millionaires into philanthropists? How can we do that? How can we breed this within the mindset of the millionaire class? And that can be done. And in Singapore, it has been done, and it has worked astoundingly. But the thing is just that also, which is true, is that a lot of individuals don't necessarily know how to work with their money, in a sense, right? So a lot of times people have debts that they put themselves into. And then a lot of times they look at Marxism as the way to solve that issue. Where if we really look at it, the best thing for an individual to do is to understand how money works. When you understand how money works at a young age, you will be a lot better with how you manage your money in the future. But if you don't know, which a lot of schools don't teach kids, how to work with your money, you're going to end up falling into the same trap. And then after, you're going to blame the system, but it's not really the system that is to blame for that. Now, don't get me wrong. There are certain things that we do need to be careful of within a capitalistic system. And that is what we call, quote unquote, pure capitalism, where it's kind of like the person can make money and they don't need to philanthropize, and they don't need to do anything that is of benefit for the individuals around them that got them to that position. So we just got to be careful with how we do things.
Did you want to weigh in on that, Leo?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say, I do think capitalism is more overarching in the sense that it's not a means of production, but it is a mode of production. It is broadly a way that an economy is organized. And what it says is that capitalism is the idea, well, number one, you've got the profit motive, that what drives investment is the idea that there will be a greater return on ROI, return on that investment, that makes up for taking the risk of making the investment. You've got commodity production, that there is an organized production of commodities utilizing the purchasing of labor power from workers. And then you have, most importantly, the private ownership over the means of production. And that's sort of the difference between a means of production, which is, like the machines and, the laborers and all that stuff, and how that stuff comes together to make stuff. And then you have the mode of production, how we organize the way that we produce things, or how we organize the means of production. And this is why I struggle with the notion of mixed economies, that there are economies that are both capitalist and something else, or socialist and something else, because I don't know what it would mean for an economy to be both owned, where the means of production is privately owned and controlled, and also not privately owned and controlled. That there is no sovereign state, at least on our planet, that is not capitalist, where the means of production are not privately owned and controlled. And I think that largely that is the issue, is that much like we have done with our political systems, where we have and that's not to say that like they're by any stretch of the imagination perfect, because that would be a lie, but like we have largely done with our political systems, we have democratized them, we have collectivized them, we have made them much more cooperative and integrated. Why haven't we done the same thing with our economic systems? Because our economic systems are not run that way. They are privately owned and privately controlled, and there is an extremely small amount of people who exercise massive control over the direction in which society goes as a result of their ownership over the means of production, which manifests in the form of the ownership over economic capital that they can then use to influence their broader social systems to act in their interests. And I would say that this is why we're seeing a lot of the problems that we're seeing with moving into truly democratic systems, is because we have this ownership class lingering over society, sort of lording over it the same way that the monarchs did, in the same way that the aristocrats of the days of yore did, in the same way that the feudal lords did. It's just under a different mode of production, a much more modern mode of production. And that is ultimately what the problem with capitalism is that it is a system that still maintains class structure in a hierarchical way, and this also plays back into the notion of revolutions. And it is that hierarchical class structure in human society that is ultimately the problem, because what you have as a result of different classes is, if I can maybe just go, I would try to keep it to another minute or two, but because this really is a very central feature of the Marxist analysis. So is that as a result of class structure, different humans that live in these different classes will live under different material conditions. And what material conditions is think of your ability for food, water, shelter, healthcare, transportation, communications. Obviously, it's a little bit different today in the modern world than it was 1,000 years ago. But those things, the things that furnish your existence, that's your material conditions. And that as a result of class structure, different humans in different classes that's what defines the difference in class, is the material conditions under which you live. And what you will find in human society is that it seems to divide into ultimately two distinct classes. And there will be a very, very small class that exercises undue and considered by many immoral amounts of power over society, and then a significantly larger and ultimately much more powerful class that is exploited in some way, shape, or form, usually through either the ownership of or purchasing of labor power, that maintains or furnishes the exorbitant existences of the people that live in this very, very small class. And that as a result of these distinctions, you're ultimately going to have an antagonism between these two classes, those who own and those who labor, because those who own do not labor to maintain their material conditions. Right. They depend on those whose labor they either own or purchase. For most of human society, it's been just outright ownership over others' labor power. Today, it is purchasing it. And that's really the distinction between capitalism and the modes of production of the days of yore. They all maintain class structure, but you just can't outright own somebody's labor power. But this antagonism arises between differences in material conditions, and how one class is ultimately furnishing the much more exorbitant material conditions of a different class. And this is inevitably going to result in conflict. And it is a result of this conflict, it is out of this conflict, that you get rapid and radical change as a result of attempts to resolve the conflict, that further furnishes social progress by further progressing the means of production. And that is what Marx meant by a revolution. Rapid and radical change that occurs quickly in society, that furnishes further social progress in virtue of furnishing a progress in the means of production, usually through a difference in its organization. But what we have seen is that throughout human society, despite the fact that the modes of production have changed, up to this point, at least thus far, they have all maintained class structure, and capitalism is no different.
I would completely agree with that. But the one thing is that it's literally based on, because if we look at societies that mix different economies together in a sense, and let alone even the modes that we actually have, where we can, my God, my thoughts are all over the place right now. Even with modes of
I'm glad I'm not alone there.
Oh yeah, seriously, my brain is moving at 1,000,000 miles per second. And I can't keep up with it. But anyways, so with the modes of production, right? With the modes of production, I think that when we are looking at this very moment, is capitalism slowly but surely realizing that we can't go back to the beginning of capitalism, which was during the 1860s. Or I would even push it back a little bit to the early 19th century, where we started seeing these huge corporations come out of nowhere. Literally, that's where modernization came from, was the capitalistic class. Before that, you had individuals that were starving to death. Literally, farms, in a sense, had to hopefully pray for the best weather conditions in order to build up for the coming winters and stuff. And slowly but surely, through the capitalistic class of individuals wanting to quicken the modes of production, and not just that, but quicken also the way how production gets from one area to another, which actually built our modern society to this very day, and actually has helped save tons of individuals from the errors of the past, where just one wrong crop failing could lead to thousands of individuals or more dying from starvation. And let alone even with the way that we have cures for polio and cures for all these things that are out there came from the capitalistic system in and of itself. So we need to look also at the way that the capitalistic system has benefited us at this very moment. And the thing is that I find that the capitalist system in and of itself can do that, but you need to look at a way of how to incorporate fairness into the mix. Because the problem isn't just that you have one small class of individuals that are up there maintaining all the product, not maintaining all the product, but maintaining all the resources, while everything kind of like trickles down to the rest of the individuals. The real issue is fluidity amongst the classes. So if you have people who are blocking you from one mode, so you can't, if you're poor, you can't reach to the next state of classism, in a sense, which is middle class, well, then you're going to struggle and continue to struggle. However, if you have more fluidity within the system, it is fairer for the individual because it doesn't hold things inside some kind of stagnant way of being. It actually moves kind of like an organism in and of itself. And it's the same exact thing that I would state. I find the economy is kind of like a tree, for instance, or maybe even like a forest. You have certain forests that don't get enough sun, or certain trees within the forest that don't get enough sun. And what happens are that those trees are stunted. But at the same exact time, you have other trees that are within the area that were able to get that sun because they were at the right place at the right time. And henceforth, you were able to see that these trees were able to grow bigger than the other individual trees that didn't have that time in order to grow because the other ones around them have grown first. But the thing is that we don't need to utilize that said system, because the thing is that the trees in and of themselves, if they had a sense of consciousness, let's just say, or a way of looking at things, they can slowly but surely state, look, how can I make this system fair? And that if we are able to utilize this function, we can then have a more organic movement throughout the hierarchical systems that would benefit everybody. And I think that that would be the best way of looking at it. So I think that capitalism in and of itself is inevitable. I think that there is no way to move around that. But the one thing that there is a way that we can do is make the system fairer, because we can do that. We can make something fair for the individual who's at the bottom rung of society to make it up to middle class and to make it up to a high class.
Your sound went out, I believe.
Yeah.
You're muted now, but I don't know if.
Yeah, you muted.
Can you
Dang,
talk?
sorry.
Oh, there
about
you
that.
are. Oh, it just like faded out. Like, oh, we lost him.
And now I'm gone.
He's gone. So you mentioned that fairness. What are some of the steps that a society can take to get to that level of fairness that you were talking about?
Perfect. Exactly. That's a perfect question. So the first thing is that, again, it needs to be
Just really quickly, I'm going to shut my camera off, but I'm still going to be present. So I just wanted to let you guys know.
So I think the one thing which is really good about creating this sense of fairness is at first understanding, and I think everybody has that sense of understanding, that everybody doesn't have the same traits as each other. So there's going to be certain things that are going to end up hindering others and having others succeed. Now, the one thing that one must do in order to have a fair society, or at least a fair economic well-being in a sense, is by at first having those individuals that make it up to that top to understand you didn't get there on your own, right? You didn't get there on your own. You got there because you had workers that were able to work for you in order to get that product out at a timely fashion in order for you to get and monopolize on this particular area within the economy. Hence, instead, what needs to happen, I think, and at first it comes to the school systems. I think the school systems in and of themselves are the very things that can help build this sense of fairness. And I think the first aspect is to show individuals that, look, you might be rich in the future. Nobody can tell you what your future is going to be. But remember the individuals that got you there in the first place.
Exactly.
You know? And from there, just like with Singapore, they understood that. And together as a community, as a multicultural community, we're able to have individuals reach those highest rungs of society and at the same exact time funnel money into those individuals at the bottom in order to help them have a reliable living standard so that they themselves did not need to lose out on not going to school, not getting an education, and let alone living within their means in order to build that sense of well-being. And that's how you do it. You give back to the individuals that helped you get there in the first place. That's how you build a fair society.
I love that. Some reciprocity, and also that takes a whole paradigm shift in society for everybody to begin thinking that way. And
that's why it's the schools. That's why. Get them at the schools first in order to
teach them Marxism. Teach them how to properly analyze societies. So that we can furnish more.
Oh, Wes wants to say something. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I've got a question for both of them. Here you go. Which you're kind of touching on, but I'm thinking of government sanctions and I don't know, any kind of government limits on labor laws and wages, all kinds of stuff like that. What would that look like under capitalism? Are you for that? And how much? Is there a limit to how much we should be controlling things? And then let Leo answer for the socialist side.
Absolutely. Because since I had the first thing, I'll let Leophilius talk about the socialistic side first, and then after I'll jump in on the capitalistic side. Okay.
Well, so what I would say with respect to at least the capitalist mode of production is if humans are living under one, you're intrinsically going to have some sort of centralized government control. If you didn't, the standards of living would just be drastically worse than they are. I think that's just an undeniable fact. And I think that ultimately says a lot about the capitalist mode of production, that rather than furnishing better, standards of living absent government control, they'd actually get worse. But so with respect to Marxism, I don't think Marxism doesn't really say anything. Marxism isn't a way to organize the economy. It's an analytic method with respect to human society and then the labor theory value specifically is not like an alternative to capitalism that, well, if we do the labor theory of value, everything will be fine. The labor theory of value is to the capitalist mode of production what general relativity is to gravity. It describes it. It's the equations of motion for how it evolves in time. It's not an alternative economic model. And I think that this is a very, very important point to stress, because I think all too often many people look at the labor theory of value specifically, or at Marxism broadly, as a thing that you do to make the world better. And neither one of them are models like that. They're analytic. Well, Marxism broadly is an analytic methodology, and it contains theories like the labor theory of value. You could consider things like historical materialism be a historical theory. So socialism is really just a transitory stage between the capitalist mode of production and communism. What would government control look like in that instance? I have no idea. I don't live in a socialist, in an economy that is currently in a socialist state under a socialist mode of production. So I don't know, because socialism is not one thing. There isn't like one thing and that one thing is socialism. Socialism refers to a mode of production that is democratized and collectivized, where it isn't private ownership. It's broad collectivized ownership and democratic control. There's a variety of ways one could do that. Centralization via government apparatuses, strong unions or worker or labor syndicates, worker cooperatives. There's a variety of different ways that one could go about implementing at least a move into a socialist mode of production. Who you talk to is going to differ, but I don't think that I can say, and this is another point I try to stress, because I've often had people, ask me, okay, so how, if we do Marxism, how does that like solve world hunger? And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Like nothing.
Let's do Marxism.
Yeah. Criticizing the systems under which we live does not entail that I alone have some solution. And I think that's entirely the wrong way to look at it. No one person has the solutions to the problems our society faces. And I think that that mentality that one person can is partly what's played a part in people like Donald Trump and like Adolf Hitler ending up in the positions that they were. Is because too many people thought one man alone could solve all of our issues. I don't know on my own how we move into a socialist mode of production. I think it's something we should all talk about and figure out how to do it pretty darn quick too. But I alone don't have all those answers. And that's where some of these questions are really great questions. But I would say that they're good questions in virtue of really underlining the fact that Marxism is how we analyze human society, how it's structured, and how it progresses. It doesn't tell us anything about how we ought to structure it or any models for what we do to make it better. There have been people like Lenin and Mao and others who have ascribed their own praxis to Marxism. There's people that agree with it. There's people that don't agree with it. But so there are forms of Marxism that do have a praxis applied to them, but classical or orthodox Marxism does not.
I completely agree. Capitalism, and even if we look at communism in and of themselves, and even socialism, is just an analytical way of looking at the ways that the system. So they have theories within them into how you can actually put them forward, in a sense, and what better way can we reach from one area to another? Because think of socialism as a transition. In a sense, socialism isn't a destination. It's a transition from one destination to another. So if that is the case, then any possible, maybe not any possible way, but there are possible ways of getting from one area to another, right? But the thing I think would be a better question would be, what is a communist system run by government? And I think that in and of itself can take many forms. It matters what form of socialism that made it to that point, right? That transitionary period, what won out of the plethora for, let's just say, the evolutionary fragmentation of all these ideas, what won out at the end, what went extinct, and what was won. And hence, I find that it literally comes, sadly, it's kind of like evolution in and of itself. The one that works together is the one that will make it to that end. The one that doesn't work together is doomed to fail at some point in time. So with capitalism, I think, like, if we go with unrestrained capitalism in a sense, where it's only individuals following a Lockean theory of how to distribute that money, or how the money can be made from the top and how it kind of trickles down to the rest, is doomed to fail. But if we move at some point where there is still a capitalistic system that allows individuals and people who have great ideas to take that initiative, get investors, and then from getting those investors, change the way that we see modes of production, change the way that we see modes of transportation, and see the way means of our modes of being, of living, in a sense. And I think that's the one thing. I think that communism in and of itself, unless everybody goes, or if everybody goes socialist and then everybody at the end goes communist, let's just say, and nobody has their own way or deviation, then we can say that that system can work. And if it is owned or not owned, but like government centered, then how you would do that, at least the way that I see it, is you would have a rotation of those government figures constantly coming in and coming out, coming in and coming out. Kind of like, if they're not doing their job properly, they will be ousted, and individuals coming in would try to think of better ways of how to benefit the well-being of the population, which is there in and of itself. That's how I would see it, with as a communist end goal, in a sense. And I think the same exact thing is with a capitalist end goal. In the end, it's how can we build, at least the way that I see it as now a capitalist, is that now we need to work on how we build that extent of fairness or whatever. And if we build that, then I don't think we even need to go full communism. I think we can actually stay at that area, and that will be the next step. You know? That's how I kind of see it.
I think it all starts with caring for each other as people, right? And I don't see that a lot here in the United States, unfortunately. I mean, it's reflected on the way that basic shelter, basic, needs are not met for some people. We don't have, health care, basic things like that.
Can I ask a quick question to all of you?
Please.
Joshua said something, and the question popped into my head. I have found that this is a question that does tend to make people kind of go, okay, I get what you're saying. Do you think that a mode of production that needs some form of external restraint in order to operate properly, or in order to better meet the needs of humans, is a mode of production that we should that we should maintain, or should we seek something better?
I got a two-prong, because I see where you're going, but I got a two-prong thing for that. The first thing that I would say is, yes, we do need to look for a better mode of production, and that I 100% agree. However, I think even if we were able to get to that end of the road and able to get to communism, let's just say, I still think that there would be some form of control to it. I don't think that would be something like anarchic, for instance.
No, not at all. No, I'm with you there.
Right, exactly. So I think no matter what period of government, not government control, I'm sorry, what system we utilize, we're still going to have some sort of cap on that said system. And henceforth, I think no matter where we are on that spectrum, that cap is going to be there. And hence, that kind of shows that no system, just like how you stated beforehand, is the best system in order to have less regulation. I think that in the end, regulation is going to be there if you are socialist, socialist, communist, or capitalist. It's just different regulations that we put on top of ourselves.
There was one thing I wanted to expound upon. This isn't like disagreeing with anybody or anything, but just sort of to open an idea, because this sort of expands on some of what Joshua said. And this is also another big feature of Marxism, is that there was a point where capitalism was a necessary feature in the evolutionary stages of human development. And there was a period where it was meaningfully furnishing further social development in virtue of furnishing greater, better production, more technological advancement. Capitalism sort of, we made the switch from mercantilism, or I should say from monarchical feudalism into mercantilism briefly, and then into capitalism. I say briefly, but it was about 2 or 3 generations. But I think people kind of get the time period here. And notice what was going on during that: coal, oil, the steam engines, railroads, all of that stuff. New ways for humans to go about making our lives better. And what helped furnish the development of that? The capitalist mode of production. Any Marxist worth his salt will tell you that the capitalist mode of production furnished drastic improvements and development in the social progress and the technological advancement of human society. Of course it did. That's why humans moved into capitalism as a mode of production. However, I also think any Marxist worth his salt would say that the system no longer does this. Humans have advanced beyond the capability of the capitalist mode of production to continue to meaningfully furnish its progress. And and this is the big thing with Marxism, whether we like it or not, humans will evolve past the capitalist mode of production, just like we evolved past mercantilism, just like we evolved past monarchism, just like we evolved past feudalism, just like we evolved past chattel slavery. It is nothing more than another evolutionary step in the way that humans organize their societies. And I think that Joshua hits on an important point that, I don't know if this was his point, but a lot of what he said really plays into this as a point that capitalism is not going to disappear tomorrow or in a week or in a decade. And in 80 years, there's probably still going to be some sense of private ownership over the means of production. I don't think it'll be nearly as prominent or centralized as it is now, but I think it'll still be there. Maybe. But I do think that we are seeing, and I think that a lot of the changes in society are showing, we're at the start of the next revolution. We have advanced technologically past the point of the mode of production that we live under to continue to furnish it. And what are humans going to do? There's only one of two things. We do nothing and we die. That sounds harsh. That sounds radical and alarmist and all this other crazy stuff. I'm not predicting when it would happen that we die or anything like that, but I don't think anybody would grant that human society has started to stagnate a bit. And if we don't make relevant changes, we will continue to all the way to our destruction. Or humans will slowly rise up as a result of tensions between the laboring class and the ownership class. And in an effort to resolve these rising tensions, we will slowly begin the trek into different modes of production. We will slowly begin to furnish a change in the ways that we do things. And what it will do is it will slowly begin to furnish a more meaningful existence for vastly more humans. This is not going to happen overnight, and it probably will not happen even in my lifetime. But by the time I die, humans, the next 30 years are going to be a bit rocky. The next 50 years are going to be a bit rocky. But I think that at the end of the day, humans will come out better off in the end. Capitalism will not be gone by the time that I die, but there will not be much left to it, I think. And I think it's inevitable.
Very good point. I think also that the capitalist, I think because history proves that things move in a trajectory, at least in a certain way, where we evolve past certain ways of production, and it has seen we've gone through these different stages of our own mental evolution when it comes through to creating these new modes of production, in a sense. And hence, I don't think that the capitalistic system is going to stay stagnant. I think that it's just one blip within the ever expanding stages of ways to either make better means of production or sometimes worse means of production, in a sense. It matters where history goes, in a sense. History is not some sort of stagnant arrow to progress, to progression.
Right.
What it is literally just stating, look at what has happened beforehand, and we've seen this happen. We've seen where modes of production was getting better, for instance, with Rome. And then what happened with the Middle Ages, we had a step backwards for close to 500 years of those means of production and everything, and of those means of transportation and everything like that. And we even look during the time of Augustus and see that that the Romans themselves were figuring out not steam engines, but the power of steam, in a sense, and all the rest of these things. And now all of a sudden, it kind of seems like, oh, well, if we look back to the 19th century, we see the first combustion steam engine and the first this and the first that. But we kind of wonder to ourselves, what would have happened if the Roman Empire didn't fragment and break apart like it did? What happens if they put more emphasis on the scientific endeavors that they did during the time of Augustus? What would have happened if they were the ones that slowly but surely started to understand how to make steam work? And these type of things are really questions that show the progression of the human race when it comes to the means of production and just the means of modernization, and how easily that can be swept away. So I think that's something. I don't think humans, unless we have some sort of catastrophic asteroid impact, some sort of, I don't know, neutron star somehow comes on into our system or something like that, I don't believe that the human race will be extinct. There will always be something there, a little fragment of human civilization.
Freaking parasite, man.
Yeah, I think the idea that like the human race will go extinct is not true, or that human society will completely collapse is not true, for the same reason that's never happened in society yet. Like we have faced some hard times as a species, as a society globally, but that's actually happened less in the last, I'd say, if we look over the last 2,000 years, that's happened less. Like this is the thing. There's too many humans who are going to be pushed to points where they're just, it's like, no, fuck this, dude. I'm not doing it like this anymore. And things will change. And that's exactly what's happened at every point in the past.
Yeah.
And that's revolutions. That's what happens.
Awesome. So we're going to wrap it up and we're going to get to the final thoughts. So starting with Wes, what are your final thoughts here? Oh, you're muted. And he's muted.
Yeah, I don't see the mute mic symbol on the screen, but I don't know if it's muted through someplace else or.
Oh, snap.
I'll try to lip sync you, Wes.
Yeah, just
speak, and after I'll
move your lips.
I do not know how to read lips at all.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I think he's having some technical difficulties. Yeah. But for two guests right here, Joshua and Leo, what are your final thoughts here so we can wrap it up? And this was a great conversation for sure.
Leo take the lead on this, and after I'll state my thing, or if he wants, whichever one.
Sure. So my final thoughts. Well, I think this was an absolutely phenomenal discussion. I think a lot of things got unpacked
I learned
here.
So much.
We heard a lot of different perspectives with respect to capitalism, socialism, communism, Marxism, what these ideas are, kind of how they play with each other. And I think that a thing that both me and Joshua have stressed, sort of indirectly, is that there is a lot more nuance to this stuff than what the average person thinks. Like, look, it's not that people can't learn this, but this isn't just a 5-minute discussion and we figure out, no, we've got all the answers. That's not how this works. There's a lot that we got to talk about. There's a lot to be talked about. And look, we need to acknowledge that there are going to be people in positions that we disagree with that might have some things right. Where it's like, you know what? Hey, I disagree with you broadly, but I think you might be right on these couple of things. I do think you're right there. We need to bring back that being able to make relevant concessions where they're at. So that's with respect to the discussion. With respect to the topic, ask questions. Read the work. Look into it. Don't let people make you think that Marxism is some evil thing that's destroyed.
Oh, here's some echo.
Echo? Sorry. Okay.
But only when we talk.
Yeah, it's only when we talk. It's weird. Where was I at? What was I saying?
You were talking about, based on the discussion, you were saying read more on the topic.
Oh yeah. Don't let people make you think that like Marxism is some evil, terrible thing that's led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. Because if you actually were to look into that and read the relevant literature, you'd find that's not really true. Also, I just want to put the thought in people's heads. If there were a small group of people that over the course of a couple of decades, 20, 30, 40 years, were actually able to provide a meaningful analysis of the structure and development of human society, and actually were able to parse out a lot of explanations for why human society is the way that it is, and their analysis actually did show that maintenance of class structure and thereby this hierarchical system is a major issue to society. If I'm speaking conditionally here, if there were a group of people that were actually capable of meaningfully doing that, and it were the case that humans really did live in a hierarchical class society, do you think that there might be a group of people whose interests lie with suppressing this knowledge because it threatens the systems that have afforded them the power, the wealth, and the control that they enjoy? Don't you think it would be in their best interest to push people away from these ideals, to make them out to be something terrible and evil that will spell the death of humans and the downfall of our societies? Don't you think that's a narrative they'd want to push?
That's a great point. Oh, will Leo say all the extremes are on the same team?
I can't say that because it's not true. I do want to comment to that, actually. I hate both sidesism. I don't care what you say. There aren't extremists on the left in the way that there are extremists on the right. Extremists on the right want to genocide gay and Jewish and trans people off the face of the planet. Extremists on the left want people to make more money, have unions, and fucking free healthcare. Stop acting like, and I'm not saying that Titan was, I think that was Titan that made that comment, was doing this. It just brings the thought into my head. Stop acting like they're the fucking same. They're fucking not. I want everybody to have health care is not the same thing as let's kill all the fucking trans people. Okay, no, that's not the same. The left is naive in many respects. They're disorganized, and a lot of them are young people. But to sit here and act like they're terrible people who want to spell the death of entire demographics of people is just wrong. That's just not the right way to look at it. The left might be naive. The left might be a little bit ridiculous in what they say, but let's not act like they're the worst thing to hit the planet. Because when I look to the other side, well, for you guys, it would be the destruction. Anyway, just because of how the screen works. But I do see that. And I always tell people, just really take several steps back and look at this. What side of the political aisle have Nazis and racists and bigots and the Ku Klux Klan and the anti-Semites? If somebody told you that, they just really kind of didn't like black people and they had a hat on with the Confederate flag, do you think that they're a raging hippie liberal or a staunch conservative evangelical? If those were the two options that you had to pick from, I think everybody knows what their answer would be. And all I'm just going to say one thing. I'm not saying anything about any person, and I want to make that expressly clear. However, I would really, really want to look at the things that I believed. If I found that my politics tends to lie on the same side of the spectrum as that of literal fucking Nazis, that would just raise some alarm bells for me, and that I'll leave it there. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything when I say that. I really want to make that part clear.
Awesome.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Oh, there we go. You fixed it.
Yay! Figured it out. Okay, I just want to say that I was very confused and not sure where I want to go yet, or lean yet, and I still am not.
You're a capitalist in your heart.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, you're
I
a
think they both
super
have-
capitalist.
Oh yeah,
Super.
but a lot of my maybe it's just a stereotype, but I find capitalism is often what brings the most money, and capital is far superior in that way. But socialism is far superior in happiness and stuff as far as treating the worker well for what they do.
Very well
I
said.
don't know if that stereotype holds too much or not, but I kind of want to know if you guys agreed that one was more for happiness. And also, I hope we do get to a Star Trek Federation one of these days. But
Right?
no matter what, it's going to be in the future, and I think we just got to keep having these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Keep this line of communication open, keep talking about it, and hopefully we get somewhere down the road.
I want to say just one thing to you, Wes. And I'm not saying that you do feel this way, but in the instance that you feel like, oh man, I've heard so many of these discussions and I don't know what to think, man. I don't know what's going on. Don't ever let that stress you out, because nobody thought of a good idea by not thinking about shit, and being confused and racking their brain for solutions.
Yeah.
And then all of a
John
sudden,
Smith,
it's like a freight
Marx,
train, boom, and you're just like,
Engels.
But yes, so don't ever be like discouraged that it's like, oh, I'm not getting this, or I don't know what way to lean, or I don't know what to think, because believe me, I read a lot, metaphysics, philosophy of science, and the more I read, the more I'm like, I don't think I understand any. I'm reading more and understanding less. That's why philosophy is dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I've read a bit on both sides, John Smith and stuff, and then Engels, Marx, does Capital and Communist Manifesto and stuff, and I don't know where to go. But that's a good thing in a way, I guess, because I'm seeing both sides, I think, and giving both a fair shake and seeing bad on both sides and good on both sides and stuff. So I think I'm in a good place, so I'm not too concerned. It's just, dealing with those that are, you need to pick a side. You got to pick a side. You can't be both kind of people. People bother me for that reason.
And don't let people say that to you. Anybody that says that doesn't give a shit about whether or not you arrive at the truth or whether you think about these things. They just want you to agree with them.
Right.
Yeah. That's
like,
true.
I will never tell somebody I want you to be. I'm not going to sit here and tell Wes I want him to be a Marxist. If he becomes one, great. What I want is for him to think about these things. I want him to do his best to understand them, because I think that the best ideas, when properly understood, will inevitably win out. And I don't need to just say you should become this. I just want you to understand it. And I think that what will follow from that is you'll probably lean into the idea.
This is great.
Well,
what about
that's
Joshua?
what
Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Wes.
I'll make it quick. So my final thought is that first, I know through my argumentation, Wes is going to be a capitalist, so it's okay. He doesn't think of it right now, but he will. No, I'm just kidding. No, so I think it's very interesting to have these type of conversations, have people on both sides of the aisle come together, but respectfully have these discussions with each other. Because in the end, be you capitalist capitalist or Marxist, we're kind of still going in the same trajectory, and that's ever forward in the future. So it doesn't matter which systems win out, because even those systems are going to be obsolete at some point in time. So the whole entire point is through where we are now, what is the best way of looking at our very societies? What is the best way? And Wes stated it fantastically. Socialism is for the well-being of individuals. Capitalism is for how one can make one's economy much better and sustainable, and plus, in my opinion, creating a modernized society. So, but the question really is that how do we how can we mix the two together in order to have both of these powers that both these systems have? Because just like how Leo stated, and just like how I am stating right now, none of these systems are made to last forever. They will change in due time. They will transform at some point, and I hope that is not the situation, but it might even regress to an agricultural system. It might regress to a mercantilist system. You never know with the way the future moves forward and how history itself plays. But still, at least at this very moment, just with this discussion, I feel and I see that we're in the right direction. No matter if we're a capitalist or a Marxist, we're heading in the right direction, and we need to continue to head in that direction so that we can stave off the other more worse conditions that lay behind us. Because
like fascism.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying like fascism.
Like fascism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That needs to be so far behind us, we can't see it in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
Sadly, history has a way of playing the same tango.
You can see that red flag and that little black symbol in the white circle just as a speck in the rearview mirror, and it still makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to see it there. I don't want to see it there.
Right, but that's the thing, though, and this is the last thing, and after I'm going to what I need to say, is that the one thing that people need to realize is that economics, politics, and the way that we interact with each other is
political
the first
economy.
very thing that mixes the way that we think. So if we're feeling that a system is failing us, we automatically jump back to prior instances of existence and say, just like with the Trumpian way of looking at things, let's make America great again, right? It's not let's make America great. It's let's make America great again. Like its past was something that was great. And that's the thing that you see a lot from the right. They feel that they're not being not accompanied, but they feel that politically they're not, their questions and their answers and the way that they want society isn't being hearkened. So they go into more conservatism. They go back into more lunacy, in a sense, in order to try to bring forward these old ideas again. So that's the thing. If the economics fails, if politics seem to fail, or if public policy seems to fail, people always have a tendency of looking back to a better golden era that they believe was a thing.
Awesome. I want to thank everybody. Thank you, Leophilius.
Before we wrap
what's
up,
up?
is there one more thing? It's only 50 seconds long. It's a short video, and no, I promise, no like copyright stuff. It's from another not monetized on YouTube YouTuber, but because I would actually consider myself a super capitalist, and so I wanted to share a little ad for super capitalism, if I may here.
Listen up, y'all. You've had regular capital.
What the hell just happened? Okay, hold on. Here we go.
Listen up, y'all. You've had regular capitalism, and all the wealth just goes to the corporations. These fat cats just sit up there in their big old... They don't do shit, okay? I'm selling you super capitalism. Super capitalism is so invested in private enterprise that every single individual actually...
I have no idea what just happened. Just give it a second.
collectively owns a portion of the workplace they work at. You're a McDonald's fry chef, man. That's your part of your business, son. That's you now. Super capitalism. In addition, I am so in favor of market incentives and market forces that I reject the private ownership of any industry which interferes with the function of those market forces. Transportation, healthcare, these are inelastic markets, dumb fuck. Super capitalism.
And there you go. Everybody should be a
love it.
super capitalist. We need super capitalism.
That's great. So where can people find you? Do you guys have social medias? I know, Joshua, you mentioned you have the Atheist Uprising channel. Is that right?
That is correct. I couldn't
Okay.
find the unmute button. But yes, that is correct.
Awesome. Atheist Uprising. Go check them out. Go subscribe. What about you, Leo? Do you have anything?
You can find my YouTube channel, Leophilius, spelled the same way you see it as on the screen, and you can find me on Twitter if you're thereabouts, at Leophilius, spelled the same way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wes, for hosting this and providing this platform.
You
This has
hosted.
been fantastic discussion. I learned so much. I'm gonna have to process this for the next day or two. Holy shit! But, and yeah, if you like what we do here, please like, subscribe, tell your mom, tell your grandma, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.